LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the July 18th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from, well, supposed to be the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, but there was no NBC News Meet the Press yesterday because they were covering the Open. I guess it's from like the oldest golf course in the world, St. Andrews in Scotland, and it's so old they don't have to call it like the Scottish Open or the, golf. It's just the Open. And anyway, even though NBC News Meet the Press always ends their show by saying if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press, we all know as regular watchers that's a lie. Why should a journalistic organization have a lie as their motto? It doesn't make sense to me, but that's what they do on NBC. Chuck Todd often says that lie at the end of the show. This week proved it to be a lie. There was a Sunday, but there was no Meet the Press. I don't know. Sometimes I go off on that tangent. But anyway, I will use the other four outlets plus a clip from this morning's MSNBC Morning Joe to round out the lack of Meet the Press. And I will mix all of that together with my political commentary and media criticism to make a fair use commentary and criticism program for you all today. As you can see, my video title topic is Joe Manchin kills planet Earth. Joe Manchin kills planet Earth. That seems to be, I often talk about, what's the most important story, or is there an important story that they missed this week? And last week I talked about the COVID surge that's coming in the United States, and that was actually covered by a couple news programs, and I will have a clip about that at the end, the BA.5 Omicron subvariant that is coming after all of us and is actually going to probably wreak some havoc in the summer and the fall and the winter. And anyway, I'll talk about that at the end. But like I said, the main topic is Joe Manchin kills planet Earth, which is Joe Manchin killed this supposed compromise bill, Build Back Better, died many months ago. I covered that for several weeks, and it was eventually killed by West Virginia, very conservative Democrat Joe Manchin, who is a recipient of a lot of donations, contributions, political contributions from the fossil fuel industry, and he decided, despite being offered a whole bunch of incentives from the Biden administration, that he would not sign on to investments in solving the problem of climate change, which also included some increases on the corporate tax rate. And that is the main topic I'm covering. And I will actually, Bernie Sanders' response to that was almost going to be my political comedy clip for the day. And I will show that as the second clip before the news summaries, because Bernie Sanders is full of sarcasm. He's got he's got quite the attitude when he was on ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos talking to Martha Raddatz. But one of the things that also happened this week is Joe Biden went to Saudi Arabia, and there was all this talk about will he meet with Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, who apparently, according to U.S. intelligence agencies, is responsible for the killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And Biden, during the campaign, said that Saudi Arabia should be a pariah nation. You'll see that emphasized in some of the news summaries, but then with the price of oil and gas going up so much, and with the possibility of there being a leadership vacuum in the Middle East with the United States withdrawing and then Russia and China coming in to fill that vacuum, you'll see that is also one of the reasons people are talking about it. But the reason here that, well, the reason that Biden got a special blowback from his meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is because he did this fist bump, like a fist bump. And it was reported on Fox News over and over again. And you'll even see it in the Fox News Sunday news summary that I'm going to show you in a little bit as the fist bump heard round the world. Well, over on MSNBC's Morning Joe this morning, Joe Scarborough and his wife, Mika Brzezinski, kind of made fun of that and made fun of Fox News bias. And, you know, I actually watch Morning Joe a lot because I wake up in the middle of the night here in California when you get way too early, and then Morning Joe, and I've been watching it over the years. And, you know, the one thing I can say about Joe Scarborough, I've never been a big fan of him, way back to when I used to watch him on Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect. You know, that word insufferable, how there are some people who are insufferable, like you can't even like tolerate to listen to them. Sometimes Joe Scarborough is sufferable. That's the best I can say about him. Sometimes he's sufferable. And this morning was one of those times when he was making fun of Fox News bias in the political comedy clip I picked out for you all today over here.
The Saudi foreign minister says he didn't hear you accuse the crown prince of Khashoggi's murder. Is he telling the truth?
No. Do you regret the fist bump, Mr. President? Why don't you guys talk about something that matters? I'm happy to answer questions that matters.
Do you regret
Yeah, it's fair.
fist bump? Yeah,
I mean,
that
some
certainly is.
networks will go on and on about the fist bump.
Yeah, I guess so.
Anyhow,
I don't know.
President Biden, think about the contrast. Anyhow, brushing off
By the way,
questions.
breaking news
Yeah.
on other networks. Joe Biden fell off a bike. Breaking news from same network.
The fist bump heard around the world.
The fist bump heard. Breaking news from another network. We don't want you to know what anybody says in the January 6th hearings. So, yeah, it's
Don't cover
fascinating.
those.
But he did fall off a bike. So, oh, my God.
So let's bring in White
What
House
shall we
reporter for
do?
Politico and Morning Joe senior contributor.
I saw my viewers there in the live comments talking about the thing that made me think of the fist bump heard around the world was when Fox News played up this fist bump between Barack and Michelle Obama as like a terrorist fist bump or terrorist fist jab. And so, yeah, thank you to my live viewers there. Iscovini Garga, which I'm probably mispronouncing, and Shmoab, which hopefully I'm pronouncing correctly, for talking about the terrorist fist bump with Michelle Obama and the terrorist fist jab. Yeah, no, I definitely thought about that. And so even though I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Scarborough, and I even recently made a video, which I should put a link down in the video description. I haven't, but maybe for the recorded show viewers, I'll put the link down in the video description for my video criticizing Joe Scarborough for carrying the water of Republican talking points, saying that Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh was mistreated in his confirmation hearings when actually he lied in his Supreme Court confirmation hearings, and the White House and Republicans stopped the investigation that would have showed that he lied. And so I still am a critic of Joe Scarborough, even though I kind of liked him making fun of Fox News along with his wife Mika Brzezinski there. But anyway, you can let me know what you think of that. I want to now, like I said, this next clip is I'm going to show you before the news summaries, and I have 4 of them because there's no Meet the Press. I wanted to show you this clip of Senator Bernie Sanders, who I'm a great fan of Bernie Sanders, and both the 2016 and the 2020 primaries. I voted for Bernie Sanders as to be the Democratic candidate for president, although in 2016 in the general I voted for Hillary Clinton. In 2020 I voted for Joe Biden. But in the primaries here in California, both times I voted for Bernie Sanders. So I am a Bernie Sanders fan, as my longtime viewers know. And here he is, like, not mincing words about Joe Biden killing the planet Earth. This is the clip that really most explains why I decided to make that the topic of my video this week. And I almost use this as the political comedy because first you can see here Martha Raddatz is like trying to ask Bernie Sanders a question about Joe Manchin, and he just like won't even wait for the question. He's like, he knows what he wants to say about Joe Manchin sabotaging Joe Biden's domestic agenda. And then later in the clip you'll see Martha Raddatz try to ask Bernie Sanders about a quote from Joe Manchin, and as like Martha Raddatz plays the audio, like as it fades into that audio, you can hear Bernie Sanders saying, "Oh yeah, I'm sure," or some. It's like this is like quintessential Bernie Sanders, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip, which I love. I love Bernie Sanders in this clip, and I'll talk about it with you a little more and why it's really important after we watch it together over here.
To Congress and the agenda there. Senator Joe Manchin, of course, abruptly pulled the plug this week on the Democrats'
No, Martha,
plans
he didn't
to
abruptly.
pass.
Martha,
Okay,
Martha,
he abruptly on Friday
He didn't
did
abruptly
that.
do anything.
He was
has
negotiating for a
sabotaged
while.
the president's agenda. No. Look, if you check the record 6 months ago, I made it clear that you have people like Manchin, Sinema to a lesser degree, who are intentionally sabotaging the president's agenda, what the American people want, what a majority of us in the Democratic caucus want. Nothing new about this. And the problem was that we continue to talk to Manchin like he was serious. He was not. This is a guy who is a major recipient of fossil fuel money, a guy who has received campaign contributions from 25 Republican billionaires. Do you think this guy is serious?
Senator, okay, you say he wasn't serious, but Manchin says his main goal is to do what's good for West Virginia, and he's worried about inflation. Listen to what he told the West Virginia radio station. Listen to this, please.
Is that right?
Inflation is absolutely killing many, many people. They can't buy gasoline. They have a hard time buying groceries. Everything they buy and consume for their daily lives is a hardship to them.
Your reaction to that, Senator?
Well, look, the same nonsense that Manchin has been talking about for a year. West Virginia, it's a beautiful state. I've had the pleasure of being there. Great people. It is one of the poorest states in this country. You ask the people of West Virginia whether they want to expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and eyeglasses. You ask the people of West Virginia whether we should demand that the wealthiest people in large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes. Ask the people of West Virginia whether or not all people should have health care as a human right like in every other country on earth. That's what they will say. In my humble opinion, Manchin represents the very wealthiest people in this country, not working families in West Virginia or America.
And Senator Sanders, I want to end with, if these provisions don't get passed, doesn't look like they will, what does that mean for Democrats' climate goals and the climate itself?
Martha, it ain't Democrats. It isn't the president. It is the future of the planet. So when Manchin sabotages climate change, this is for future generations. What's going on right now in the West, all over the world, we're looking at significantly increased, more and more heat waves. You're going to look at more drought, more flooding. This is an existential threat to humanity. And what this election must be about is whether or not we're going to vote for candidates who are prepared to stand up for working people, stand up for the planet, and have the courage to take on the billionaire class who dominates our economy and our political life. That's what this election is about. The Republican Party is not there. We need more progressive Democrats who are going to fight for workers.
Okay, thanks for joining us this morning, Senator Sanders.
So I think that clip lived up to my introduction where I talked about Bernie Sanders not even waiting for Martha Raddatz's question and breaking in with he's sabotaging the agenda. And then I think I said when Martha Raddatz was asking him about the Joe Manchin audio clip, he saying, "Oh yeah, but no, it was oh really," and I think Bernie Sanders did an excellent job of rebutting any claim by conservative Democrat Joe Manchin that he's actually serving the people of West Virginia, maybe some of the rich fossil fuel interests in West Virginia. That seems more clear. And that was of all the, well, like I said, there was no NBC News Meet the Press this week, but of the other four corporate outlets, that was like the closest, the most we got to the idea that what happened this week might actually kill the planet Earth, or of course not the planet. The planet is, been here for a very long time, and whether there's life on Earth, whether there's human life on Earth, the planet Earth is going to continue. But I'm talking more about the calamitous effects of human-caused climate change, and you saw Bernie Sanders in that last clip say existential crisis. The fate of humanity may rest on the decisions we're making in this budget, and Joe Manchin being a stooge of the fossil fuel industry. That's why the title topic of my video today is Joe Manchin kills planet Earth. That may, if you're wondering what's the most important topic that the cable or the corporate news media should have covered this week, well, the fact that we killed the planet, or killed human life on the planet and a lot of the other life on the planet, because we couldn't come up with a budget that actually invested in mitigating the worst effects of climate change, because there's a 50-50 Senate, and one of the 50 Democrats is totally bought out, and to a lesser extent Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema, like Bernie Sanders said in that last clip. That's maybe the most important story of the week, when people are looking back on the news from 10, 20, when the people who have to live underground because there's no longer an atmosphere that protects them from solar radiation or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to go all 12 monkeys on you all, but that is the intro clips, and now I have 4 news summaries to show you, from longest to shortest. And the longest one this week, because Chuck Todd is not here this week to have the biggest, longest package, that honor actually falls to Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday. This isn't really a news summary, it's a news summary, because of course Fox News isn't really a journalistic organization. It's a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, which that's what Roger Ailes created Fox News to be, which is what you would know if you read this book here, Gabriel Sherman's The Loudest Voice in the Room. And Fox News does not disappoint in terms of its total political bias this week. Here you see Shannon Bream and Aishah Hasnie says, Biden returns from the Middle East with no solutions. Is that journalism? No solutions. And then my favorite part, well, should I pre-criticize the clip? Well, they talk about the backlash to the Biden fist bump heard round the world. This is kind of what Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski were talking about in that first clip I showed you. And then my favorite piece of bias in this clip, I have to pre-criticize it, sorry, is they talk about gas prices down slightly, but inflation number huge inflation number, but gas prices down slightly. Well, the inflation number was 9.1%. The gas prices were down from $5 a gallon down by 50 cents. That's 10%. And the 9.1% was annualized. So it was actually 1.3% for the month, but over 12 months, that's 9.1%. The 10% decrease in gas prices in the last month, that's just 1 month. If you annualize that over a year, it would be 120% drop in gas prices annualized. So they totally, this is all of the news in this news summary from Fox News Sunday is skewed to make Biden look as bad as possible. It couldn't be worse. This is as if it were written by the communications department at the Republican National Committee. That's my opinion. You can tell me what you think after we watch it together over here.
News in Washington. President Joe Biden back at the White House and not bringing solutions back with him from the Middle East to the many political problems like sky-high gas prices plaguing him here at home. New Fox News polls we'll bring you this hour show a majority of Americans disapprove of the job he's doing and his handling of the economy. That says a hotter than expected June inflation report leaves Wall Street bracing for another big Fed rate hike to cool it all down. In a moment, we'll ask White House economic advisor Jared Bernstein what the plan is to address the surge in prices. But first, let's turn to Aishah Hasnie live at the White House with more on the controversy surrounding the president's trip. Aishah.
Shannon, good morning to you. The president is back home from a very busy 4-day trip to the Mideast, overshadowed by one moment.
It was the fist bump seen around the world. The president with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the man the U.S. holds responsible for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
He basically said that he was not personally responsible for it. I indicated I thought he was.
The broadly criticized greeting was called shameful and worse than a handshake by Khashoggi's employer and the publisher of the Washington Post. And Khashoggi's fiancée tweeting, "The blood of MBS's next victim is on Biden's hands."
I'm sorry she feels that way. I didn't come here to meet with the Crown Prince. I came here to meet with the GCC and 9 nations.
The president's Mideast tour, which focused on security across the region, began with meetings with Israeli and Palestinian leaders. Biden embraced the Trump-era Abraham Accords, announced aid to the Palestinians, and brokered a deal with Saudi Arabia to open its airspace to flights into and out of Israel. The president said he also discussed energy with the major oil producer.
I'm doing all I can to increase the supply. I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
That would be a welcome relief for Americans who are now paying an average $4.57 a gallon for unleaded, down slightly from the record just a month ago. Meanwhile, inflation is soaring, and so is the price for just about everything. Groceries, household items, and even airfare is up significantly from a year ago. But the White House argues the consumer price index for June is, quote, out of date because it doesn't reflect the recent drop in energy prices. Even Democrats, though, have had enough.
I think people can feel and see spin, and I don't think they like it.
Inflation is what West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin blamed for single-handedly tanking any hopes for climate change and energy funding in the party's latest economic package. The president vowing to step in with executive action as progressives lash out.
It's infuriating, it's frustrating, but it's kind of predictable.
We're going to have to just elect a couple more Democrats.
And Shannon, the president comes home to some pretty new brutal numbers. According to a brand new Fox News poll just released today, just 25% of Americans approve of his job on inflation. 40% approve of his job overall. Shannon?
All right, Aishah Hasnie reporting live from the White House for us. Thank you so much today. Joining us here in Washington, White House economic advisor Jared Bernstein. Thank you for being with us on Fox News.
And I'm actually going to have a couple clips of White House economic advisor Jared Bernstein, both on Fox News and then over on, I believe, CBS News is, CNN State of the Union. I think I have that. Fox. Oh, no. On ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. No, I'm right. CNN State of the Union with Dana Bash. So I will have a couple clips from that newsmaker. I'll have a clip of Rick Scott, the governor of Florida. I will have the Biden coordinator for international energy, Adam Hochstein, and also Dr. Anthony Fauci and the White House COVID-19 response coordinator Ashish Jha. Those will all be the newsmaker clips. But in terms of the news summaries, I think that I pretty much pre-criticized that clip in terms of the Fox News bias, but a couple other points I wanted to make is that news summary was, kind of like a failure sandwich. You know, when you're working with people and like trying to give them feedback, one of the things they tell you to do is a compliment sandwich, where if you want to give people criticism, you compliment them, and then you put the criticism in the middle, and then you compliment them again. That's because people, what they remember, based on psychology experiments, there's people remember primacy, the first thing you tell them, and recency, the last thing you tell them. So if you want to like hide something you tell them, you put it in the middle. And so that Fox News Sunday news summary, the successes of the Biden trip to the Middle East, like the Saudi Arabia is opening their airspace to flights to Israel, and Biden got like a statement of, sort of a joint statement with the interim prime minister of Israel. And so there were various successes in the Biden trip to the Middle East, and Fox News put it right in the middle of their news summary, in between, sandwiched with failure. So if you, for your primacy memory and your recency memory, you get failure, and they put the success right in the middle. Anyway, I also pre-criticized that clip. I don't even think that qualifies as a news summary, especially, I have to even say one more time, they talked about how the gas prices are down slightly, even though they're down 50 cents from like $5. That's 10%. But inflation is way up, because that's 9.1%, and the 9.1% is like 1.3% annualized over a year. The gas prices down 10%, that's just 1 month. Annualized, that would be like 120%. But of course, Fox News emphasizes that the gas prices are down slightly, while the inflation is huge increase. But anyway, what else can I say? But the next longest news summary, since I'm showing them from longest to shortest, is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Martha Raddatz, and then their reporter Martha Bruce talk about this is like the rightward limit of a journalistic coverage of the Biden trip to Saudi Arabia. They do talk about the fist bump. They don't call it the fist bump. I guess before I was saying fist bump heard around the world, but it's actually the fist bump seen around the world on Fox News. I noticed that during the summary there. But they also talk about Joe Manchin killing the major climate/tax plan from Biden, and I'll talk about that news summary a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, President Biden has just concluded a controversial 4-day trip to the Middle East, where he recommitted the United States to the region and celebrated closer ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. But after promising during the 2020 presidential campaign to make Saudi Arabia a pariah for the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, the president traded tough talk for fist bumps, urging the oil-rich nation to boost production amid rising pressure to combat sky-high inflation and soaring gas prices. The Saudis made no such guarantee during the trip, and while overseas, a big story breaking here at home. The president receiving a major blow to his domestic agenda, moderate Democrat Joe Manchin of West Virginia putting a stake in the heart of Biden's major climate and tax reform proposals. The question now, with Biden back in Washington, can his administration turn the economy around with less than 4 months to the midterms? Chief Business and Economics correspondent Rebecca Jarvis is standing by. But we begin with senior White House correspondent Mary Bruce, who has been traveling with the president. And Mary, the president is now home after a week of criticism, but also some important achievements abroad.
Yeah, Martha, the White House is defending this trip. Look, the president knew he was going to face blowback for this, but it was a risk he was willing to take to try and lower gas prices back home and advance regional security and stability. The White House saying you can't make progress on these issues if you aren't in the room. And they were able to make steps towards normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And the president did leave with an expectation that more oil will be flowing into the market that could bring Americans some relief. But there was no firm announcement. And then, of course, there are the optics of this, that highly choreographed welcome, that fist bump. It was the image the Saudis were hoping for and were eager to release to the world, an image the White House had been hoping to avoid, but that now will be a lasting image of this presidency, Martha.
And Mary, as the president was pushing for more oil production to combat inflation, this announcement from Joe Manchin dealt him an equally crushing blow.
A crushing and potentially fatal blow to the president's top agenda items. Manchin is firm here. He is not going to support funding for climate change programs. He's against raising taxes on the most wealthy, and that effectively kills the president's hopes of passing his ambitious climate change agenda and also of passing that sweeping social safety net programs that included things like universal pre-K and paid family leave. Now, the president is trying to salvage what he can here. He's urging Congress to act to lower health care costs. That is something that Manchin says he will support, and Biden says he will take executive actions to do what he can to counter climate change. But Martha, there's just no question this is a massive setback for the president's top policy goals.
It certainly is. Thank you, Mary. Let's turn to our chief business and economics correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis. And Rebecca, the economy is sending very mixed.
And one of the things I'm wondering about in terms of Biden's trip to Saudi Arabia is the foreign trip actually kind of trumps, and excuse the expression, but trumps the news about the economy that, last week I showed ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. The first person they went to was Rebecca Jarvis talking about the problem with inflation. But this week, on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, they started with Mary Bruce, the person traveling with Biden to the Middle East, and they covered the controversial Saudi trip and the fist bump, not necessarily the fist bump heard around the world. And by the way, I'm watching my live viewers and I'm seeing there's some streaming issues and audio sync issues, so I guess I will probably upload the recorded version of this live stream like an hour after I finish here and do it as like a like a YouTube premiere video. The recorded version shouldn't have all the audio sync issues, so I apologize for that, and I guess I'll be joining all of you in an hour or so to watch the recorded version of this video, because apparently there are some streaming problems. I don't know why, but those first two news summaries, Fox News Sunday did kind of the Republican National Committee version of the news for the week, like, how can we blame Biden? ABC is kind of right-leaning. Martha Raddatz is sort of your center-right journalist, I guess. I've talked about Martha Raddatz many times, and I don't want to go off on that whole tangent. But those are the two longer news summaries. The next two are both pretty good, but they're like, this is first CNN just does like a 90-second news summary, which is kind of covers the same issues in a more succinct way, which I'm all in favor of being succinct. Like, isn't brevity the soul of wit or whatever? But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the CNN State of the Union news summary from Dan Abash. yesterday together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is really feeling the price hikes. President Biden is back in Washington this morning and brushing back criticism of his meeting and fist bump with Saudi's brutal crown prince this week.
Do you regret the fist bump, Mr. President? Why don't you guys talk about something that matters? I'm happy to ask a question that matters.
The face-to-face in oil-rich Saudi Arabia comes as the president tries to take on soaring gas prices and inflation. A new report this week showed inflation rose 9.1% in June compared to last year, the fastest rate in 4 decades, and without any easy solutions. President Biden also returns to a domestic agenda that has once again been stymied by Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. The West Virginia senator announced Thursday that he is ending current negotiations on the sweeping climate and tax plans President Biden and other Democrats hope to pass, saying he wants to see more data on inflation before moving forward. The move makes it increasingly difficult for Democrats to make good on those campaign promises before the midterm elections and has left many in his party furious. And President Biden is advising congressional Democrats to take what they can get from Senator Manchin and pass his deal to lower drug prices and health care subsidies. Well, here to talk about all of this is economic advisor to President Biden, Jared Bernstein. Thank you for coming in.
And like I said, I will have a couple clips of economic advisor to President Joe Biden, Jared Bernstein, coming up. But first, I want to show the shortest of the news summaries. Also, a good journalistic news summary, except this one shows the bias that I talk about. This is a bias that Fox News shows. All of the corporate news media show this bias. If you have like an exclusive guest, sometimes you'll bias your news summary at the beginning of your program towards that exclusive guest, which I guess Margaret Brennan does over on CBS News' Face the Nation, where they actually focus in on updates on what has been learned at the January 6th committee hearings, because they have Adam Kinzinger as their exclusive guest, and that's the guest that's actually sitting next to Margaret Brennan, as you can see when the camera pans in at the beginning. And I'll talk about that news summary a little more after we watch it, the final news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We have a lot to get to today, but we begin with the new January 6th investigation developments. Late Friday, the committee issued a subpoena for Secret Service records following the revelation that the agency had erased text messages from the day before and the day of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Last Tuesday's hearing detailed a chaotic White House meeting between the former president, White House counsel Pat Cipollone, and a group of outside advisors over a plot to seize ballot boxes and overturn the 2020 election. This week, the panel will hold a primetime hearing on Thursday focused on the 187 minutes from the time when President Trump left the stage at that rally in the Ellipse.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol
until he issued that infamous video message.
So go home. We love you. You're very special.
Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger will be co-leading that hearing on Thursday. Good morning to you.
Morning.
So let's start with these secret.
So that's the last and shortest of the news summaries, focused on the updates from the January 6th committee hearing. That, I don't know, is that going to be more important 10 or 20 years from now, looking back on this week, the January 6th committee hearings about the loss of our democracy, our democratic republic here in the United States? Is that the biggest story, or is it our inability to invest in the changes necessary to mitigate the worst effects of climate change? Probably climate change. If I don't know, maybe it's just I'm thinking about 12 monkeys and we're living underground because climate change has made the surface uninhabitable or whatever. I don't know. You can let me know what you think in the comments section. And now I'm going to get to my newsmaker clips. And I promised a couple clips of Jared Bernstein, one of the Biden administration's economic advisors from their Council of Economic Advisors. This first clip, well, both of these clips are Jared Bernstein talking about Joe Manchin sabotaging the Biden's agenda to address climate change and also raise taxes on corporations to make up for what the Trump administration did, where they slash taxes on big corporations so they're not paying their fair share. Both Dana Bash and I'm going to talk about first here Dana Bash, and then later I'll talk about Margaret Brennan talking to a different government official. But here, this is at the very end of the interview. CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash asked Jared Bernstein about the climate change agenda, and he gets the closest in this clip to what you saw from Bernie Sanders earlier, saying it's an existential threat. We're all gonna die. Why aren't you talking about this more? He talks about the cost of the wildfires and all the huge disasters because of the changing climate. But in this clip, you'll see Dana Bash is trying to finish up. I'm at the end of my time for your interview, and sorry, I don't have time to hear about the planet being killed by Joe Manchin. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this CNN State of the Union clip together over here.
Okay, let's talk about the domestic agenda and what happened this week. Senator Manchin backed out of negotiations on parts of that plan, the climate crisis, corporate tax increases. President Biden said that the Senate should pass the scaled-down plan to extend Obamacare subsidies, what you were talking about, allowing Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices, for example. I want you to listen to what Senator Manchin said about why he blocked other parts of the agenda.
Inflation is absolutely killing many, many people. They can't buy gasoline. They have a hard time buying groceries. Everything they buy and consume for their daily lives is a hardship to them. And can't we wait to make sure that we do nothing to add to that?
Is President Biden frustrated with Senator Manchin?
I think the president is very much and very compelled to get Congress to work with him on his climate agenda. He's already taken unprecedented action. And I think this is important because if he can't find a legislative path to clean energy, the urgency of the problem is so significant that, as he said on Friday, he will find an executive order and rule change path to get there. And I should say, he's already found that path. He'll continue down it. He has invoked the Defense Production Act to ramp up clean energy production in this country. He has helped to kickstart the offshore wind industry. He has set the toughest ever emission standards. He will continue to pursue that with or without Congress. But the urgency of the issue, Dana, is, I think, it is beyond me how anyone could miss it. Over $100 billion per year of cost to our economy based on floods, wildfires, droughts. Look at the geopolitical pressures from this. A Russian petrocrat who's prosecuting war based on weaponizing fossil fuels. So there is a great rationale to undertake what this president will do, and he will continue to press.
Thank you, Jared Bernstein. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
And he's facing off against President.
So, right at the end of the interview, Dana Bash there gets Jared Bernstein, the economic advisor to the Biden administration, to talk about the real threat from climate change. Hundreds of billions of dollars of damage from, wildfires and all these other weather events that are made more extreme by climate change. But Dana Bash doesn't really have that much time to talk about it, so it's not as good as what you saw from Bernie Sanders, that we're at, what's happening this week. Joe Manchin rejecting the investments in mitigating the worst effects of climate change. That's going to be, that might be the biggest news. my video titled Joe Manchin Kills Planet Earth this week. But the next clip is Jared Bernstein, the same guy, being cross-examined by Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday. And first he talks about the climate change stuff, and they don't really talk about the threat to planet Earth because this is Fox News, of course. Instead, they talk about inflation, and Jared Bernstein makes a really great point about cutting the deficit, but Shannon Bream is ready for it and does a great follow-up cross-examination question. You know, I used to be a criminal defense attorney, and so one of the things that I am most skilled on is cross-examining people, because, you know, criminal defense attorneys, we don't put on a direct case that much, or we just we destroy the case of the prosecution mostly by cross-examining people and destroying what they have to say. Well, Shannon Bream is ready with cross-examination for the Biden administration official, but then I'm going to juxtapose that cross-examination with the total lack of cross-examination of Republican Senator Rick Scott by Shannon Bream in the next clip. But first, let's see Shannon Bream actually sort of act like a journalist, because she's a Republican propagandist talking to an official from the Democratic presidential administration of Joe Biden. So here she's actually sort of fulfilling a journalistic function that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Sounds like his domestic agenda, though, is imperiled in part by Senator Joe Manchin. There are talks about doing something big on climate change, closing loopholes, along with these other things that are agreed upon. But he signaled this week he doesn't want to swing for the fences. He has been a fly in the ointment for the president for a lot of his domestic issues, but he's gotten a lot of praise for blocking spending and bigger packages, from economists across the spectrum who say Joe Manchin actually did the White House a favor by putting the brakes on some of that spending. It doesn't sound like he's in the mood for any more.
Well, let's talk about swinging for the fences when it comes to a good baseball metaphor, so seasonally correct there, on clean energy. Because that's precisely what this president intends to do. He recognizes the urgency of taking action against climate change and building up our clean energy industries, which are so important for good American jobs going forward. And if there's no legislative path forward, then he will take the executive order and rule change path. Now, I shouldn't say he will take. I should really say he's already taken. So this president has tackled aggressively climate change measures already. For example, he's tapped the Defense Production Act to significantly ramp up the production of clean energy. He has set the most rigorous emissions standards yet to be set in this country, and he has helped to jumpstart the offshore wind industry. Now, those are all measures that he took by the power of the pen through executive action and rule changes, and he will continue to do that. Now, on spending, let me say something on spending. I was looking at these numbers this morning. That's what I do on Sunday morning to prep for our conversation. The budget deficit is down $1.7 trillion with a T this year. All right, that's 9 months of the fiscal year. So that's 9 months of this fiscal year. A $1.7 trillion reduction in the budget deficit, a 77% decline, the largest on record. So I think when it comes to spending, I think the record is strong.
To be fair, we're coming off of, everybody would agree if you're looking at hard data, off of enormous pandemic spending. That was
totally fair point.
Numbers in 2020. And when you look ahead, the Congressional Budget Office says if you look at the years 2023 through 32, they say 1.6, is going to be the deficit number that's going to be added every year, and that we're going to have the worst ratio with regard to GDP within a matter of a few years. So
you raise a totally legitimate point, which is that when you're coming off a period of high spending, you're going to see some declines. But here's the thing. If you look at the percentage contributions to that $1.7 trillion in deficit reduction, 26% of that decline is due to increased receipts, increased revenues. 18% is a function of the lower spending. So spending fell 18%, revenues went up 26%, even faster. Now, how do we get faster revenue increases in an economy that is taking the kind of hits that we've been talking about? It must be a much stronger economy than a lot of people are saying, and in fact, that's the case. So no denial at all about the unacceptability of these elevated prices. And we've talked about some of the actions we're taking, particularly in the energy space, but also when it comes to ports, getting goods from ship to shelf. We're doing everything we can to help ease price pressures. Congress needs to step up and do a lot more. But underlying that is an economy with the strongest labor market in generations, spinning off revenues that are up 26% this fiscal year.
Okay, let's talk GDP, though, because it was negative in Q1. The Atlanta Fed is...
And there you can see Fox News do, Shannon Bream on Fox News do more like vigorous cross-examination about are we going to be in a recession? I've talked about this on previous programs that the first quarter, January, February, March, the U.S. economy did not grow. It contracted, what they call like negative growth, because we're so capitalistic that anything is put in the context of growth. So even if we don't grow, we have negative growth. No, the economy contracted like 1.5%, 1.6% in the first quarter. And if it contracts again in the second quarter, that's April, May, and June, 2 quarters of negative economic growth, economic contraction. I thought that was what you call a recession, although later in that interview, Shannon Bream with the Biden economic advisor there, Jared Bernstein, he says, well, that's not technically the definition of a recession. Well, who knows? Who cares? But my point is Shannon Bream did a good job of cross-examining the person from the Democratic administration. But then later in the program, she has on a Republican, the senator from Florida, Rick Scott, who's also in charge of the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, who they're supposed to get Republicans reelected or elected to the Senate in 2022. And he put out this plan that includes tax increases on the lowest earning Americans. If you make like anywhere up to like $40,000 or $50,000 a year, even more if you're joint filing with a spouse in the United States, you don't pay any federal income taxes. In fact, at the lower levels, because Ronald Reagan's administration decided that they wanted to promote work and not welfare, when you're at when you make like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year, you get something called the Earned Income Tax Credit, where the federal government actually gives you money to like supplement what you're earning instead of making you pay taxes. It's like a benefit you get because you're not on welfare anymore, you're working, and we don't want to like penalize you and take stuff away. We want to make it like better for people who are working, so that's why we have the Earned Income Tax Credit. But Rick Scott, senator from Florida, he has this plan where, no, every American has to pay some federal income taxes so they have skin in the game. So he came up with this plan where everyone has to pay some federal income tax, which means a huge tax increase on everyone earning like less than $40,000 or $50,000 a year, or even more if you're a married couple filing jointly. So that's something the Democrats have made a lot of political hay with. Joe Biden has pointed out over and over again. So Rick Scott was on Fox News Sunday, and Fox News Sunday is a Republican propaganda outlet, so you would think they would hate people who are in favor of tax increases especially on working Americans. But Shannon Bream doesn't really ask Rick Scott about that part of his plan. Instead, she shows a clip of Joe Biden criticizing that part of the plan and just doesn't verify it or give any credibility to it in terms of, the Fox News anchor saying, this is true. You are saying that you're going to raise taxes on working Americans, on, the poorest working class Americans. Why would a Republican want to raise taxes on the poorest working class Americans? No, that's not the question. It's just, here's Joe Biden saying something. Is it true? And no follow-up from Fox News. So this is like the worst Fox News bias I'm going to show during the program, and I will talk about it a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Money. The government is good at that under Republicans and Democrats alike. There is a spending fever here in Washington, and you mentioned lowering taxes. So because that point came up, I want to bring up what the president said in Cleveland just a few days ago, talking about tagging you with the issue of taxes. Here's what President Biden said.
Rick Scott from Florida, who heads up the Republican campaign committee, he put out the plan. What does the plan do? It makes the tax system less fair by wanting to tax everybody making under $100,000, significantly more on average, a lot more money. It actually raises taxes on those working families because he thinks you don't pay enough in taxes already.
Okay, your response to the president.
Well, first off, I've always cut taxes, never voted to raise taxes. The Democrats and Biden even now want to raise taxes in every tax bracket. But here's what I believe. We've got to get Americans back to work. If you're able-bodied, you don't have young children, incapacitated dependent, get to work. When you go to work, guess what? You pay taxes. You pay income taxes, and you pay sales taxes, and you buy things. But what the president wants to do is every proposal he has is to raise everybody's taxes. My proposal is do what I did as governor. Get people back to work. When I was governor, we added 1.7 million jobs. That's how you get everybody to have skin in the game. But the Democrats, they want to spend your money. Like their idea on how to reduce premiums for somebody, it's not to create a better delivery system in healthcare. No, it's to raise your taxes. And we already have $30 trillion worth of debt, and the Biden agenda is to take it to 45. That's why we have the inflation we have. That's why gas prices are up. Why is gas up so much? It's because Biden and the Democrats, they have an agenda to get rid of fossil fuel. That's horrible for this country. We should be energy independent.
Well, to take on the agenda change that you would like to see will require more GOP senators in the Senate. But let's talk about some of the headlines as you are working to lead that effort. USA Today, Rick Scott leads the Republican bid to regain the Senate. Those candidates are struggling. Washington Post, candidate challenges. Primary scars have GOP worried about Senate.
And that's not a bad question because Republicans have had some really bad candidates win the primaries already, and maybe some more will. Herschel Walker in Georgia, and Doug, no, that's the governor guy, Frank Oz in Pennsylvania, and there have been some bad candidates, but you saw Shannon Bream did no follow-up on multiple lies told by Rick Scott there. I never raise taxes. I don't believe in raising taxes. Well, the plan you put forth does raise taxes on the poorest working Americans, and all the way up to, like I was saying, 40, 50, even more, $50,000 a year, even more for married couples filing jointly. He wants everyone to pay federal income taxes, even though a lot of people now don't pay federal income taxes. They pay payroll taxes and sales taxes, and he talked about all those taxes and how supposedly Biden wants to raise taxes, and there was no cross-examination from Shannon Bream. Very different from the cross-examination you saw of Jared Bernstein, even when he said something true, which is that Biden has cut the deficit in a huge way from the Trump administration because of all the COVID spending, which was Shannon Bream's follow-up. But if you're worried about inflation, cutting, it's the deficit that's important. It's not the amount of spending. It's the spending compared to the taxes. If you raising taxes actually helps with inflation, because inflation is caused by too much money, not enough goods. And so if you cut spending or raise taxes, according to modern monetary theory, you are reducing the amount of cash in the economy. Cutting spending, raising taxes, same thing. Cutting the amount of money in the economy cuts inflation. So very bad cross-examination from Shannon Bream in the second clip compared to the first clip. The next clip I want to show you is the last clip on my main topic. This is the Biden coordinator for international energy, international energy affairs, Adam Hochstein, being asked on CBS News' Face the Nation by the host Margaret Brennan, also about problems with Biden's climate change agenda. Doesn't really give you the existential crisis you heard from Bernie Sanders, a little bit more from Jared Bernstein in the CNN State of the Union clip. This is more about just economics, not like existential crisis for the human race, many other species, because the planet is warming too much and a lot of people and animals are going to die. That doesn't really come up in this clip. And you'll see Margaret Brennan brings it up at the end of the interview and is like, kind of like Dana Bash on CNN, trying to like, hurry up, don't talk about the death of life on the planet. I have an interview to finish here, which I will talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
But in the meantime, I want to ask you quickly about the president's climate change efforts. This bill and his proposal is completely stalled right now. The president says he's going to take executive action. What is the plan? What are you going to actually do here in the United States?
Well, I think we've tried to get a plan where we can incentivize, create incentives for
You can't
U.S.
block new
investment.
oil and gas drilling, right? You can't do some of those things because they would counter your efforts.
Well, I think what we want to do in this bill that we have proposed, and we are hopeful that, we still hope that that's what Congress does, is to give it the kind of incentive assurances that we can have additional American investment in climate, renewable energy, electric vehicles. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Why would we want to create an environment in which China's ahead of us, the rest of the world is making the investments, and we're not? We want to be able to put the kind of incentives that there'll be additional investment in the infrastructure for renewable energy, for solar, for wind, and for electric vehicles, and for our nuclear fleet in this country. That's how we get to climate. We didn't get that today. The president is determined to take some action that he can through executive orders and through other actions.
Like
we'll see what we can do this week and in the coming weeks. But again, I think that the responsibility here is to be able to invest into our future. Whether we like it or not, some don't like it. This is the future of energy markets in the United States and around the world. We got to decide, do we want the U.S. to lead, or do we want the Chinese to lead this?
You got to convince Senator Joe Manchin. We'll be talking about that ahead in the segment. Thank you very much.
And they talked about Senator Joe Manchin in the following segment and mentioned climate change, like briefly in terms of what the legislation that Joe Manchin opposed was regarding, but that was like the biggest mention of climate change on CBS News' Face the Nation. So if you're thinking about what's the most important story from people looking at the news summaries from 10 years or 20 years or 50 years from now, when, people are wearing, gas masks and living underground and like our 12 Monkeys future, or who knows what. I think possibly, I think there's a great chance that our inability to deal with climate change is going to be what people look back on 10, 20, or 50 years from now as to the biggest stories that we weren't covering. But the final story I want to cover here in the final newsmaker clip is the other big story. You know, last week I talked about how none of the big five corporate outlets even really mentioned COVID-19, even though there is this Omicron subvariant BA.5 that is becoming more and more prevalent, is immune evasive, which means if you've even if you've been immunized and boosted, or if you've had a recent infection, you might not have a lot of you might not have the ability to avoid getting infected by this new variant, and it looks like we're going to have a big spike coming up. Well, earlier this week, the CDC confirmed what I was saying during my live stream last Monday, and both ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Martha Raddatz had on the White House COVID-19 coordinator Aishah Hasnie to talk about that, and then over on CBS News' Face the Nation, they had Scott Gottlieb, a board member of Pfizer, on to talk about that, and also about Biden administration failures on monkeypox. If you want to see how we failed to contain monkeypox, go to the link under sources in the video description for CBS News Face the Nation, where the entire program is split up into segments on their YouTube channel. See what Scott Gottlieb said in that segment, really criticizing the Biden administration for failing to contain monkeypox. Also saying that we're looking at a new spike in COVID coming up in the summer and the fall. And here's Aishah Hasnie also talking about that, and also talking to people like me who are over 50 but have not gotten a COVID booster in 2022. I got my COVID booster back in November, and I guess it's time to get another booster, which I will talk about a little more after we watch the final newsmaker clip together over here.
BA.5, which clearly, because of its ability to evade immune responses either from the vaccine or from people who have been previously infected, the ability to infect an individual is enhanced over prior variants. So this is something you don't want to panic about, but we really need to pay attention to it.
Dr. Anthony Fauci discussing the latest COVID variant driving a spike in new cases across the country. Here to discuss is the White House COVID-19 response coordinator, Dr. Aishah Hasnie. It's great to see you again, Dr. Hasnie. This new BA.5 variant is described as the most transmissible. We don't want to panic, but it is now the most dominant. Deaths are also increasing. So how dangerous is this?
Yeah, good morning, Martha. Thank you for having me back. As you heard from Dr. Fauci, it is the most immune evasive. What that means in practical terms is that if you were infected 3-4 months ago, you can get reinfected. We're seeing high levels of reinfection. We're seeing people who are not up to date on their vaccines have a lot of breakthrough infections. But the good news here, Martha, is that our tools and our vaccines, if you are up to date, if you get vaccinated recently, if you get an infection, if you get treatments, those continue to work really well. So this is an area of concern, but we know how to manage this.
But are those who have been vaccinated, boosted, and have been infected before getting infected at the same rate as those who have not?
Yeah, we're still seeing protection against infection. I mean, obviously, protection against serious illness is still preserved, and that's the good news. But we're still seeing some protection against infection, but not as much. This is that immune evasive nature of this virus. So if you got your booster, let's say last November or December, you don't have as much protection against this virus as you'd like. So one of the key messages coming out of this moment is if you are 50 or over, and if you've not gotten a shot this year, in the year 2022, it is absolutely critical that you go out and get one now. It will offer a very high degree of protection.
You know, I have to say, I've been traveling again this week.
So, yeah, there you see Aishah Hasnie say if you're over 50 and you haven't gotten a booster in 2022, get the latest booster. And, you know, he was kind of talking to me because I'm over 50 and I got my booster in November. And but the reason I wasn't getting it is the same reason I saw Schmoab down in the live comments say, I'll wait for the Omicron booster. Well, actually, in the part of the clip I'm not showing, at the end of Aishah Hasnie's interview there with Martha Raddatz, she actually asked him, you know, some people over 50 are waiting for the more Omicron-specific booster coming in the fall. You know, is that reasonable? And he said, no, if you're over 50, get the current booster now, and you can still get the Omicron-specific booster in the fall, but this current booster will keep you more protected in the summer and the fall until that Omicron-specific booster is available. Actually, if you go to the CBS News Face the Nation interview with Scott Gottlieb, at the link down to Face the Nation in the video description, he actually says that the Biden administration had the opportunity to buy like 100,000 or more doses of a more Omicron-specific vaccine that could be available now, but they decided not to, and they're waiting for the one in the fall. But anyway, I was kind of thinking I'd wait for the one in the fall, but then like Aishah Hasnie on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, he was like talking to me through the TV and saying, no, get the one now and it will protect you until you can get the Omicron specific one in the fall. So I actually think I'm going to get a vaccination sometime during this week, and then hopefully it won't affect me too badly. And that was my last Newsmaker clip, so I appreciate all of you who joined me for this live stream. It looks like I'm going to have to upload the recorded version with less audio sync problems, hopefully, and I will set that up as a premiere video at sometime in the next hour, probably on YouTube. And anyway, thank you all for joining me, and I will be back next Monday with another Liberal Viewer Monday Media Mix-Up. There's some possibility I will cover the primetime the last January 6th committee hearing that's going to be in primetime on Thursday. Maybe on Friday I'll do a live stream about what Trump was doing during the 187 minutes that he didn't react when the Capitol was being insurrected or whatever. I don't know if I'll have time to do that, but whether or not I do, I guess I will be seeing you back on Monday, next Monday, for my next Liberal Viewer Monday Media Mix-Up. And until then, or until I have some other reason to do a live stream or upload some other kind of video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.